Hello everybody, this is Bradley from Race Beacon and today is a special day. Today is day one in the FIA Contract Board's hearing between Alpine and Oscar Piastri. There are two possible outcomes here. The first is that Oscar Piastri is actually contracted. He is legally bound to be an Alpine driver for next year, or whatever they decide to do with him. Or the second option, that Alpine contract, it's out the window. The McLaren contract is valid and Oscar Piastri can, completely unobstructed now, join McLaren. Now, you may be thinking, like myself and a lot of journalists in the paddock, that this matter had already been resolved. It had already gone to the FIA Contract Board and they ruled in favour of McLaren. And that's almost true. As this article from Automotor und Sport, which is a German publication, suggests, that decision by the FIA Contract Board a couple of weeks ago that we reported on, it may not be exactly what we thought it was. This article suggests that the contract board may have previously only ruled that Piastri's team were allowed to talk to other teams, and in that sense the McLaren contract could get validated, because it's probably a perfectly watertight contract. But that ruling doesn't necessarily allow Piastri to break ties with Alpine and make that move without their consent. So while it seems the McLaren contract is valid, it's a completely legitimate contract, without Alpine's permission, potentially, that's what's being decided today, whether or not we need Alpine's permission for Piastri to make that move. And that brings us today, what's actually happening. We found out at Spa with interviews with Otmar Szafnauer that they will be taking up this case with the FIA Contract Board on Monday. There is a virtual meeting that will have the representatives, probably from Piastri's side and Alpine's side, and potentially McLaren's as well, where they will all be discussing what they feel all these contracts mean, and the FIA Contract Board, which is as high as the teams are legally allowed to go as per the Concord Agreement, which all of the teams sign, the FIA Contract Board is final. Whatever they say, it's final. You can't take it to a high court. You cannot take the contract matter to a higher court. This was mostly agreed in the Concord Agreement for the sake of the sport. The last thing Formula One as a brand and the FIA want is two of its teams taking each other to a high court, which is quite public. And quite frankly, the teams probably want to avoid the high courts because it's not good publicity. So how long is this court hearing going to take? Have we had precedent for this before? Yes, we have. Jenson Button, I think it was around 2005 to 2006, really wanted to move to Williams. But the FIA Contracts Board made the decision that he would have to stay with BAR Honda, and while Honda eventually withdrew, it did end up with a championship with Jenson at that team, which is now Mercedes. And in that case, while it may be slightly less complex in this Piastri case, it only took 2 days. So one would safely assume that in 2 to 3 days' time, midweek sometime, we will probably be given the verdict in this case. And as I said at the start, there's two possible outcomes. The first being that Oscar Piastri is stuck at Alpine. What happens then? Obviously, relations between Piastri and Alpine have suffered. The tensions are high between them. Otmar Szafnauer this weekend at Spa saying that Oscar Piastri lacked integrity. And if you're about to have a driver for next year, that's probably not what you want to be saying. It's definitely not going to boost the relationship. So the way I see it, no matter what anymore, no matter how this FIA court decides, Piastri won't be driving for Alpine next year. Now, I think if the FIA Contract Board rules in favour of Alpine and Piastri is an Alpine driver, of course, the best option for Alpine is, well, they can recoup a lot of the money that they spent on Piastri as a junior driver funding his career by selling him to McLaren. McLaren have that valid contract, they just need some agreement between the teams, and that will probably cost quite a few million because Alpine know that McLaren want Piastri, so they will hardball it. And this is especially made harder for McLaren by the fact that they have already released Daniel Ricciardo from his contract. So a swap deal between Ricciardo and Piastri, it's not even possible. Ricciardo has been bought out of his contract. He will see out the season and he will no longer be a McLaren driver. Ricciardo's contract was bought out from between $15 to $20 million as well. So that could be a very expensive mistake from McLaren if the contract board rules in favour of Alpine. There's two possible ways they can make that money back from the funding of Piastri's junior career. Like I say, either by selling Piastri to McLaren or suing for compensation. That would basically mean allowing McLaren's contract to go ahead despite him being a driver for them and saying, hey, you're a driver for us, give us all that money back. And that would probably be an out-of-court settlement. I don't think they'd want to chase that one up to the courts, but Otmar Szafnauer didn't rule it out. We did a video on that earlier this month. But another very interesting development that came out of the Spa paddock was that Alpine would quite like Pierre Gasly and to have an all-French lineup at the French outfit for next year. Makes sense, right? Esteban Ocon, despite frictions in the past between himself and Gasly, seems open to the move, saying that he has nothing wrong with the guy. Many people in the paddock would beg to differ there, but let's see how that relationship goes. There was another interesting development from Spa, though. Now, apparently, and for me, there's a big question mark on this one, AlphaTauri want Colton Herta. And look, the guy's not a bad driver at all, but he's an IndyCar, and he doesn't really have a super license yet. But let's just gloss over those problems, because there's a much bigger one. He's contracted with McLaren. Now, let's say hypothetically here, Alpine win the case when the verdict comes out. This gives them the chance to sue Piastri / McLaren for tens of millions of dollars in compensation. But let's say they really want Pierre Gasly. You know, they're desperate for Pierre Gasly. That means Colton Herta's got to end up at AlphaTauri somehow, because that is the only way that AlphaTauri will get rid of Pierre Gasly, is if they have Colton Herta as a replacement. So let's say Alpine win this case and they say to McLaren, hey, you know, we will probably beat you in this case. It will cost you $10 to $20 million. If you release Colton Herta so that AlphaTauri can buy him, the Red Bull program can buy him and contract him into F1, then they'll release Gasly and we can have him. So we'll drop the case if you release Herta and give him to AlphaTauri, which would be interesting. It probably would solve all of the team's problems, including AlphaTauri's. But like I say, I'm not entirely sure on that one. That seemed like a very out-of-the-blue rumour. But you never know, more qualified journalists than me said that from the paddock this weekend. And just because I don't see it, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Now, let's say Alpine lose this case. I think they will still try to take it up with the high courts. Not that Piastri should be their driver, but rather damages. Like I say, I think they've almost completely given up on the idea of him driving for them next year anyway. Whether or not he'll be contracted with them, that's for this court to decide. But if they don't rule in favour, I think they will try to sue for damages with McLaren and Piastri anyway. They can take that to a higher court. Like I say though, it's not good PR, and it may end up in some kind of settlement between the teams and driver. But we've only got to wait a couple of days for the verdict, and hopefully you're now up to date with everything that could happen and everything that is happening over the next day or two. It's the FIA Contract Board with their virtual meeting making that decision, and I think I've relayed the most accurate potential outcomes here. Obviously, it's the world of Formula 1, so probably none of those are going to happen, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. I always read every single comment and try to reply to as many of them as possible. And also, if you want to keep up to date with this story and all of the other stories in the world of Formula 1, be it with videos and live streams, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. It really helps out, it's free, and you can always change your mind later. But guys, I hope you all enjoy your day, and thank you ever so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.